In 1989, Doctor Who was cancelled after 26 years. The effects of the cancellation would go on to affect the show's history for many years, and the show would not properly return until 16 years later, with a revival series in 2005 starring Christopher Eccleston and Billie Piper. But what if had been different that year? What if Doctor Who didn't vanish from the television after the winter of 1989? What would the show have been like in the 1990s? And what would it be like if it lasted up to the modern day? Hello, my name's Optical Spectre, and this is Doctor Who, the cancelled years. In this series, I'll be discussing and showcasing my thoughts and predictions on what Doctor Who would have been like if it received a 27th season, and so on until 2019. With a new producer and Doctor and fairly new script editor and companion, Season 28 of Doctor Who would have likely been seen as a new era of the show. Well, the newest the show had been since Season 24, or even Season 18 for that matter. With several people from the show in the 80s, including actors and writers, stating that Doctor Who was likely to get darker had it not been cancelled. Season 28 would have likely been the start of this new dark era to the show. This season would have been the debut of Ian Fraser as the new producer and Richard Griffiths as the 8th Doctor. With Doctor Who now slowly recovering from the near cancellation in 1985, I imagine Alan Yentop, the controller of BBC Two, would have wanted to give the show a fair chance to prove that the show could be as great as it once was. So the episode count will now be increased from 14 to 20 and the story count from 4 to 6. Meaning that Doctor Who could now have 2 4-part stories and 4 3-part stories. And now let's discuss the new Doctor. With the mix of the new darker feel to the show and Griffiths being noticeably the oldest Doctor to play the role since John Pertwee, the 8th Doctor's personality would have been sort of a mix between the 7th Doctor's while harkening back to the 1st Doctor with that grandfatherly figure. Unlike Hartnell in the 60s, this Doctor would mellow out throughout his era. His new outfit would likely reflect this Doctor's personality of being more dark and older, therefore being more sensible looking. It would have consisted of a black suit with a black waistcoat and a simple coloured tie, mainly being red, making the 8th Doctor the best dressed Doctor so far. However, I imagine in later series, the colours and some of the materials of his outfit would vary from time to time between episodes, just so it all wasn't the same each single episode. Kinda like how John Pertwee's outfit changed a lot during his era, but near enough looked the same. Obviously we have a new Doctor, so a new title sequence would have been needed. However, because of the low budget Doctor Who would have been on at the time, I think it would have been cheaper to reproduce the Sylvester McCoy titles than to produce the brand new title sequence. But to show that this is definitely meant to be a new title sequence, minor changes would have been made to them. Kinda like how the Peter Davison titles were changed when Colin Baker debuted. So although they follow the same sort of similar pattern, they look different. Alongside replacing McCoy's face with Griffiths', I imagine the colour scheme would have been changed from purple to blue, adding a slight retro effect to the title sequence, and the introduction of a brand new and edgier sounding theme tune. And one final thing before we actually discuss the predicted episodes, a new TARDIS interior would have been introduced last season. The only reason I didn't mention this last video is, well there you go, I forgot to mention it. This design would have been done by Mike Tucker. It would have been vastly different from anything seen prior, mainly due to the fact that the console was now held up from the ceiling instead of being connected to the floor. So with all that now out of the way, let's discuss the 6 predicted episodes that would have been seen in Season 28. The first story would have been Last of the Daleks. It was to be a 4-part story written by Ben Aronovich. The story would have acted as the post-regeneration story for the 8th Doctor. There would have been discussion about skipping this story, as they didn't want to deal with the post-regeneration stuff and have it be set 6 months after Elysium. However, I think this is likely it wouldn't have happened because it would have caused some confusion between fans. So this story would have been set mere minutes after the events of Elysium. Like Elysian in Season 27, this story never got an official plot, but unlike Elysian, the story wasn't even planned fully. This story is the first of what will become a my series known as original stories. These stories are ones that I've created myself based on either the era that it's in and the genre of the era and the season. Anything someone involved in Doctor Who in the McCoy year might have said, and what I think would make sense for a story. So the plot for Last of the Daleks is my own, however the title was used for an opening story in Doctor Who magazine issue 255 where they discussed what if the show wasn't cancelled. It would have been set on the moon planet named Fyldor, and it would have featured an infantry of Fyl soldiers living in an underground bunker. When they land on the surface and exit the TARDIS, the Doctor and Rin are immediately arrested as alien spies by the Fyls, and they are taken underground to the Fyl bunker. They are thrown into a cell and the Doctor tries to escape in, but just before he can exit the bunker, he is cornered by two Daleks. The Doctor is taken to the Fyl leader named Tullivan, and he reveals that the Daleks are actually slaves to the Fyls. Because of Scarborough's destruction and remembrance of the Daleks, the Imperial Dalek numbers were dropped massively, giving the Fyls a chance to finally strike back against the Daleks. It resulted with the Fyls winning the war and the Daleks being captured as slaves. While researching into the Daleks' casing along with the Daleks' DNA, Fyl scientists found a way to alternate the Daleks so that the Dalek mutants lie dormant and near enough dead, but the machine of the Dalek is primary in control, and with no free will, it makes them the ultimate servants and slaves. Naturally, the Doctor is suspicious and is angry at the Daleks, so he obviously at one point tries to destroy them, and warning to the Fyls that the Daleks are still dangerous no matter how dormant and dead the mutants may be. But the Fyls are too smug for to care, claiming that they are the masters now. He comes to learn that the reason the Fyls are actually on Fyldor is because they are on a top secret mining project to mine into the planet's surface and to recover an old Imperial Dalek shuttle, presumably holding Davros, so that the Fyls can make and create Daleks that are loyal to the Fyls 100%. Eventually the mining project succeeds at finding the shuttle. Davros is discovered and captured, and he is awoken by the Fyl leader Tullivan. After some debate and discussion in the confrontation room between the Fyl leaders and Davros, a compromise is made. Davros will create these new Daleks so long he has his own laboratory in the now abandoned mining project cave. The Doctor is mostly unaware of what is going on. He only knows that the Davros' shuttle has now been located. So when he sees the new Daleks rolling out, he is furious. He begins attacking these new Daleks, which ends up with him being put into maximum lockdown, where he learns of Davros' deeds and how he is responsible for building all the Daleks. He gets Rain to sneak off and investigate Davros to prove that he is doing something wrong. Rain is able to sneak past the guards and stealth away into Davros' lair, where she discovers that Davros is installing these new Daleks with undormant mutants lying within the Imperial escape shuttle, who are set to attack on Davros' word. With all the proof she needs, Rain heads back to the main Fyl bunker to warn everyone about the Daleks' attack, but it is too late. Davros hears Rain leave and commences the attack. She arrives at the main bunker to discover the slaughter has already begun. She convinces one of the Fyl's guards to free the Doctor, and once he's freed, the two alongside Tullivan formulate a plan on how to stop the Daleks. The plan involves evacuating as many Fyls as possible and closing the nuclear reactor underneath the base to explode, destroying the base, Davros and all the Daleks within it. The plan only somewhat works, as all the Fyls including Tullivan were killed by the Daleks. Before the reactor blows up, we get some final monologue between the Doctor and Davros, with Davros trying to prove his innocence and asking the Doctor to take him with him, but the Doctor refuses, telling Davros that he gets all that he deserves, and he leaves Davros to be killed in the exploding base. With no one left alive on the planet, the Doctor and Rain leave in the TARDIS, with the Doctor somewhat questioning his actions just now. The next story would have been Night Force, written by Eddie Young. It would have played at first like a typical murder in a big old mansion story, but with a Doctor Who twist coming in around part 3. The academics who inhabit the house are secretly working on a quote-unquote time machine that can send a message back in time so they can warn their past selves about the young woman named Edie who they were sheltering at the time, 10 years ago, and telling them that she does not have an affection and that they do not need to kill her. The Doctor would agree to help, as he knows that the universe would fix everything and nothing in the present would change. Edie would come to life, back to life very briefly, albeit in a zombie state, so he does agree to help them, and he helps her build the time machine and send the message back. However, the leader of the academics, Major Dickens, had been keeping a secret from his team. He wanted to claim the machine for himself and to be recognised as the first human to kill someone and then revive them. So the Doctor goes back in time 10 years earlier to tell the academics to kill Edie, even though there's nothing really wrong with her, and to expose Dickens's plan to the academics. However, all starts going wrong when it turns out that the body of Edie wasn't buried in the coffin underground in the graveyard, but in a bear suit in the house. The zombie Edie then gets out the suit and goes around the house and begins killing off the rest of the academics, before the universe catches up with her and it renders her dead. The Doctor returns to the mansion in the modern day to collect Rain, as she was left behind to deal with Dickens and the rest of the academics. The Doctor reveals that he couldn't actually kill Edie, as it would have gone against everything he stood for. This story would have likely gone down as one of the darkest stories in the show's history ever. The story would see the light of day in 2006, when it was adapted into an audio story for Big Finish, however with some changes. These changes are mainly replacing the 8th Doctor and Rain with the 7th Doctor, Ace, and Big Finish companion Hex. The story would also be a lot more scary and a lot more graphic, as Big Finish are able to get away with it more than the TV show. The 3rd story would have been named either Blood and Iron or Animal. However, I think Animal sounds better, so we're going with that, because it's my series. We're going with that. Deal with it if you don't like Animal. It would have been written by former script editor Andrew Cartmel. By 1991, Cartmel had actually moved on from Casualty after only doing the 1 year, so it's very likely he would have wrote this. The story would have saw the return of the Metatraxy from Airfade and Winfred Bambera from Battlefield. It was to be a 4-part story and would have involved animal experimentation, drug use, and animal rights activities. A lot of the story would have played out a bit like a Unit story from the John Pertwee era, with Unit being involved quite a good bit in this story. A lot of the story would have likely played out if it was a season 25 or 26 story, as it was written for the Sylvester McCoy era, and as such, I don't think it would have worked with the new Doctor and Rain, as they would have been slightly out of character. An ongoing thread in this story is Sam Cunningham's death. By 2001, the year the story is set in, Sam had passed away. While the Doctor was aware of his death, Rain wouldn't be, so an ongoing thread in the story would have seen the Doctor keeping his secret from Rain until right up at the end, where Rain gets very upset at the Doctor, but continues to travel with him. This story would have saw the light of day in 2011, when it was adapted into an audio story by Big Finish, however with some changes. These changes are mainly replacing the 8th Doctor and Rain Cunningham with the 7th Doctor, Ace, and Rain Creevy. The 4th story would have been Illegal Alien, written by visual effects assistant Mike Tucker and his writing partner Robert Perry. It would have been set during World War II during the Blitz, and it would have featured the return of the Cybermen. The story was originally planned for season 26, however Cartmel at the time held off the story as there was already a World War II story in season 26, that being The Curse of Emmerich. The story would have been the debut of a new Cyberman design, after nearly a decade of the J&T design which debuted the Nerf Shock. The design was to be more scarier than the previous one, and would have harkened back to the Patrick Troughton Cybermen. The story would have been a typical Cyberman converts planet story, but set in 1940 during World War II. The story would have used a lot of elements from other Cybermen stories, such as Silver Nemesis and The Invasion, to make this story Silver Nemesis done better. The story also would have saw the return of the Cybermat, who had not been seen in the show since Revenge of the Cybermen. And in this story, the fear of the Cybermen is put back into the public's mind, as the Cybermen are presented a lot more scarier and almost presented like the Nazis, which would have worked really well with this story's theme and setting. However, I think the story would have been very ambitious. This story would see the light of day in 1997, when it was adapted into a novel for the BBC Past Doctor Adventures reign, however with some changes. These changes are mainly replacing the 8th Doctor and Rain with the 7th Doctor and Ace, and replacing the original Cyberman design with the design from The Wheel in Space. This novel would get a reprint in 2014, however the 2006 Cyberman design on the front. The fifth story would have been A School for Glory, written by Tony Etchells. Sadly, not a whole lot is known about the story, as not a lot was planned for it. It would have been set in the trenches in World War I, and that's as much as we know. So I've come up with my own concept for the story, based off speculation and the trench idea. It would have been the show's first pure historical since Black Orchid, or the Highlanders if you're really picky. It would have shown the harshness of the First World War, and how it was having an effect against the soldiers in the trenches, alongside showing how women were taking over factory jobs while all the men were out at war. The TARDIS arrives in the trenches and the Doctor and Raina are immediately arrested. Raina is taken back to England as she was suspected to be a woman undercover as a man trying to be a soldier. The Doctor is believed to be a German spy and to be executed in 3 days by a firing squad, and the TARDIS is taken away to a scrapyard to be junked. For most of the story, we follow Raina as she escapes Britain back to the trenches to recover the Doctor. The Doctor's story, however, sort of plays out like a side plot, so a lot of the time the story is heavily focused on Rain. Eventually the two reunite outside the old scrapyard and escape leaving in the TARDIS, as soldiers are beginning to surround the junkyard and the local area. Sadly, A School for Glory is yet to have any kind of adaptation, whether that be audio or novelisation, but never say never, it may happen one day. The final story would have been Network, written by Mark Platt. Ben Ivanovic was supposed to be a co-writer, but had to go uncredited due to the BBC rules at the times, stating that a script editor could only write 1 story per season, and he had already done Lash for the Daleks, which was episode 1. According to that article in Doctor Who magazine 255, the story would have been planned as the official finale of Doctor Who. With Doctor Who now a steady-ish popularity in the public, Frasier was planning to end the show on a high note while it could, so with no certainty as to whether season 29 would have happened, this story was written in mind as the final ever episode of Doctor Who. It would have saw the return of the Rani from Time of the Rani, and it would have been set in a university where she was posing as Vice Chancellor. The story was also to have cameos from Winfried Brambera and Sam Cunningham. The Rani would have been creating a biological computer virus that she could use to take over the world's computer systems. She also would have used students of the university as guinea pigs and sampling. But the Rani doesn't know how to complete the virus, so she lures and tricks the Doctor to the university and tricks him into creating the virus, with him under the impression that the virus is a cure for the Rani as she has a terminal illness. Sometime during the story, Rain would go off to find her father and tell him about all the travels she has had so far. She was warned by the Doctor not to tell him about his future, so she tries not to, but she eventually feels pressured to tell him his future in 2001. Not involving Rain too much with the plot would have been likely done, as it would have given the Doctor something to do, as a lot of the stories in season 28 would focus on Rain more than the Doctor. The Rani is defeated by the Doctor, however, before she can escape with her plans and start all over again. The Doctor infects their TARDIS with part of the virus, meaning she'll be stuck in orbit around the nebula until the virus wears off her TARDIS. Rain returns to the Doctor with Unit and Bambera to evacuate the building and to take the Rani students from the hospital. Rain questions about whether she wants to continue travelling with the Doctor, and the Doctor understands if she does. However, she decides to keep travelling with him anyways. Like with Survival, the story would have ended with the Doctor telling Rain about the wonders of the universe and how there's so much more to see. And he also tells her about how nothing can last forever, so you have to make the best out of all the life you have. This ending would have likely been done due to it being penned as the last story. This bit in particular would have been penned by Aronovich, much like how the ending in Survival was penned by Cartmel. While this story is yet to get any kind of adaptation, elements of the story would have been used in the 2014 Big Finish story, The Rani Elite by Justin Richards. And that would be it for season 28. I think the season would have gone down as one of the best seasons in the most recent years. It would have been a good and strong standing end to the show had it actually ended in 1992. And nearly every episode would have been considered really good, the flaw being Animal, which to be honest is a bit shit in real life. But obviously for this series that wouldn't be the end of Doctor Who. Not going to fully predict how, but let's just say this season averaged between 4 to 7 million views per episode, and that would have meant it's good enough to renew for another season. and what an impact season 29 would have on the show. So that's it for this overview. In the next one, I'll be discussing season 29, the season that ends the 5-year Cardinal Master Plan.